It's my distinct honor and pleasure to present to you our distinguished president, Elaine Ecklund.
Tonight I want to talk about three things. We are at our 70th anniversary of our association, meeting in the great city of St. Louis. And it seems right, first, to think of where we have come from, to reflect on our origin story. Second, I want to spend the majority of the time discussing my hope for a more diverse future for our organization, where we will continue to attend to diversity in studies of religion and diversity in the groups of people who are doing the studying. Translated well to diverse groups of listeners, and along the way, I want to share with you pieces of the new Society for the Scientific Study of Religion strategic plan, particularly those pieces that are most attentive to the topic of tonight's talk of diversifying the social scientific study of religion the next 70 years. And third, I want to humbly share just a little bit about my own scholarly story, insights about diversity I've learned through some of the work that I've been doing with other scholars at the Religion and Public Life program at Rice University. So I have three big points. Actually, that's a kind of a lie. I don't have only 3 points. I'm reminding just in the moment of being on this panel, much like this with these 3 religious leaders, and I was the one who was at the end of the line, at the end of the panel, and it sounds like I'm talking about walking into a bar joke, but there were 2 Christians and a rabbi, so the 2 Christian pastors and a rabbi, and the first pastor says, these folks give sermons, so, says, I have 3 points, and is extremely eloquent, and is very impressive and succinct, and gets right to the point, is very moving. The second fellow says, I also have 3 points, and I'm at the point, just rifling through my papers, my many, many papers, trying to figure out how I'm going to possibly distill the many, many papers that I have in front of me into 3 points. And lo and behold, of course, the rabbi says also, I too have 3 points. And so I felt very, very compelled in that moment to say, I too have 3 points, which I didn't. I just said I have 3 points, and I have about 67 sub-points. So you know how it is. I'm among my people, among academics, where it's okay to have a lot of sub-points. You kind of expect that. So first, let's talk about our origin story. In the beginning, God created. That's a kind of origin story, isn't it, right? This is how the origin story of the Christian tradition starts. Origin stories and their interpretations are super important. Interpretations of that one can shape how people interact with gender and gender roles, how they interact with science. As I found in some of the work that I've done with colleagues David Johnson, Brandon Vadinathan, Cleve Timsley, Bob Thompson, some of those folks who are here tonight. As Dan Bolger explains in his studies on faith-based nonprofit poverty alleviation, origin stories can help frame who's deserving of help and the main reasons for helping. Origin stories, even if a given individual who's part of an organization doesn't actually know the full details of the story, can actually be passed through organizations, be embodied in the lived practices of organizations in ways that have an enormous impact. At this point, the Society for the Scientific Study of Religion is an interdisciplinary academic association that stimulates and communicates and promotes social scientific research of the highest quality about religious institutions and experiences. That's where we are now. But let's reflect on where we began. I think it's a really interesting story. According to our turn of the millennium SSSR president, Helen Rose Ebaugh, one of the things I had the privilege of doing as I was preparing for this talk is reading lots of other presidential addresses. And I might encourage you to do that at some point. There's some really, really wonderful things that our previous presidents have said. The founding of the SSSR, originally the Committee for the Social Scientific Study of Religion, dates from a meeting in Boston in 1949. So that's why we're calling it our 70th now. The founders of the committee were J. Paul Williams from the Department of Religion at Mount Holyoke and Walter Houston Clark from the Department of Psychology at Middlebury College. These two men first met a year prior at Mount Holyoke when Clark gave a talk on psychology and religion titled God and the Rat Page. That title's not really significant to this talk, but it's kind of an interesting title. James Gilbert, in his book, Redeeming Culture, American Religion in the Age of Science, explains that following the talk, the two conversed and agreed, quote, that there needed to be more empirical research in the area of religion and that there was no dynamic organization to encourage this. But there seems to be a little bit of tension about our organization's early days. James Dietz, SSSR president from 1972 to 1973, formerly psychologist of religion at Yale University, provides a slightly different interpretation of the beginning days of the committee and stresses the activities of others, particularly Ralph Burrow, a founding member of SSSR and professor emeritus of theology and science at Melville Lombard Theological School of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in Boston. He writes that Burrow and Clark organized the committee as a discussion and support group among persons largely in theological and philosophy faculties who had an interest in social scientific perspectives, usually not shared by colleagues on their own faculties. After corresponding further, those who were part of those original meetings began recruiting others, and a series of exploratory meetings were held. A letter dated April 26, 1949, from J. Paul Williams explains the reason behind this initial, what was called the SSSR meeting, called by him and Clark. Both of us, he says, deplore the lack of interest in the study of religious problems of the average social scientist, and equally the failure of religious workers like the clergy to make any extended use of scientific procedures in many fields where such procedures would be immensely profitable. Our idea is that it might stimulate work along these lines if we could organize a group together with such interests, which might meet occasionally for exchange of views and discussion of projects. And they did just that. From 1951 to 1956, the organization was called the Committee for the Scientific Study of Religion, but at the end of 1956, with membership numbering already in the hundreds, the name was changed to the current Society for the Scientific Study of Religion. What stands out to me in this first phase of our origin story is that the association wanted to stand for something distinctively social scientific, something that used social science methods to address the most important religious problems of the day. I also want to stress that the original group of founders seemed to come from a place of feeling a little bit like academic outsiders in their respective guilds. They didn't see much social scientific work coming to bear on problems of religion, and likewise, they didn't see much discussion of religion in the midst of their broader disciplines in the social sciences. Let us go on. The founders of the committee had an expansive vision for what would become our own Society for the Scientific Study of Religion. There was a desire to have collaboration and communication between social sciences and religion scholars. The founders also seemed to want to promote research that could have practical benefits and public impact. They hoped that the social scientific study of religion could be of use, not simply to the social sciences, but to religious groups and organizations. So then, in the beginning, there was a deep sense of multidisciplinarity, a desire to speak across disciplines in the social sciences, and there was a desire to translate research to communities that might be able to use it. Multidisciplinarity characterized the early leadership of the association, likely fueled by the vision of the founders to stimulate social scientists and others on college campuses to work on religion as a research interest. The initial leadership of the society tried to achieve diversity of disciplines among its ranks. The first chair of the society was a psychologist, Walter H. Clark, and then a sociologist, of course, Talcott Parsons, who served from 1952 to 1953, and later there were religion scholars. Relevant to our theme of diversity, I should mention that all of these initial leaders were white men, although Horace Ecklund was Jewish and Polish born, I read in our historical notes. It was not until much later than 1949, actually 1982, that the society elected its first woman president, Marie Augusta Neal, a sociologist, from 1949 to 1982. And it was not until much, much later, in 2015, that our association had a first non-white president, Fen Gong-yang. Perhaps as part of the deep desire to translate research and attend to a diversity of scholars and diversity of topics and issues related to religion, in its early history, there was also a tension within the organization about how to professionalize itself, how much to serve the clergy, how much to go beyond its Protestant origins. Others write that the overwhelmingly Protestant mainline origins of the founders of both SSSR and the Religious Research Association, our sister organization, are apparent across histories. According to Gilbert, during the 1950s, the SSSR continued its efforts to professionalize itself in the study of American religion. This necessitated moving outside the northeastern intellectual corridor beyond the heavily Protestant bias in its early membership. Moreover, the society also started reconsidering the problem of participants. Was the organization to be composed primarily of academics, psychologists, and sociologists who were interested in religion? Or was it some sort of personal religious commitments, an unwritten qualification for membership? To this end, SSSR in the 1960s were particularly concerned with making sure that the organization and the research it promoted was not seen only or even primarily as a tool in the service of organized religion or Christian faith. Leaders in the SSSR strenuously made sure throughout the 1960s, I might add, of course, during a time of national upheaval, during the civil rights movement, during a radical increase in the diversity of immigrant groups, to clarify that the organization was not in any way related to the institutional church or to a specific religious tradition, even if many of their members also happened to be white Protestant Christians. A letter from SSSR Executive Secretary James Dietz, dated November 5th, 1963, seems to make this point. SSSR is not a Christian organization, Dietz writes. Although many of its members are Protestant Christians, several of us believe it must zealously guard its position of organizational non-commitment in order to perform its proper functions. I want to make a side detour on a disciplinary focus of the organization. The influence in the sociology, my own discipline in the SSSR, only grew from the 1960s on. In 1973, a majority of members surveyed were not sociologists. However, in our more recent SSSR 2018 survey report, which I'll talk about in a bit, about 45% of the people of us listed sociology as their academic discipline. Of course, there are also numerous numbers of psychologists, religious studies folks, political scientists, and other disciplines as well. The commitment of the association to social scientific research excellence was embodied and is embodied in its flagship publication, the Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion. When the constitution of the now SSSR was adopted in 1956, its objectives included the dissemination of information about work on religion, but no journal. The first issue of the JSSR was published in 1961, and the growth of the JSSR dovetailed with the increased focus on the social sciences and the secular, in quotes, scientific study of religion within the SSSR. There were tensions, though, even with the early days of the JSSR, if I'm reading the historical record accurately. Editors and readers, one of our former editors wrote, of JSSR have seemed to show a strong preference for quantitative studies over other kinds of scholarship. 2/3 of all articles in JSSR's history have been quantitative in nature, with the remaining third divided among qualitative, theoretical, biographical, and other kinds of essays. So that was in 2000. By 2012, about 10 years later, that wasn't really the dividing point in the journal. Then journal editor Marie Cornwall emphasized in her letter from the editor, it was the dividing line was that the journal seemed to be focusing too much on some disciplines and not on the others. She said it's a multidisciplinary enterprise, and then went on to lament that sociology still seems to dominate. Cornwall writes, among the 13 former editors of JSSR, now this was in 2012, 7 have been sociologists, 4 were psychologists, 1 a political scientist, and we are just now about to appoint Laura Olson for the 2nd political scientist to edit the journal. Laura's had lots of roles in the association, haven't you? Yeah, that's right, you have. She goes on to say, while much attention has been given to parochialism in the social scientific study of religion, the need for a more global perspective, future editors may want to address the degree to which the journal represents the full spectrum of social scientific research on religion. Though I am a sociologist, she said, my stint as editor has given me a greater appreciation for the contributions of various disciplines. Ensuring a diverse scholarship on the pages of the JSSR has been one of my objectives. Even so, it would seem that sociologists are more dominant than ever. Our history informs the framing of our present, doesn't it, and our vision for the future. With all of this in mind, a team of SSSR leaders embarked in 2018 under the leadership of Corey Edwards, then SSSR president, who I need to add at this point was the first woman of color to be president of our organization and the first Black person to be president of our organization in 2018. We embarked on a strategic plan, a main piece of which ended up being about diversity. It's particularly important, I think, that we're talking about diversity here in St. Louis, a city where religion, race, and power have intersected. A place where religious communities have both instantiated and challenged race-based inequalities. So this is my second big point. The future of the social scientific study of religion and the SSSR, I think we know this, is an association needs to attend to diversity in the studies of religion, diversity in the groups of people who are encouraged to study religion, and diversity in our efforts to translate to our listeners. As an organization, we have come a very long way in 70 years, from a collection of scholars birthed from an after-conference lament to a full-fledged society for the scientific study of religion that fosters truly interdisciplinary dialogue and collaboration among an international group of scholars from many different disciplines, about 1,000 current members. Our flagship journal, the Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion, is one of the more cited resources in the field. And I can say personally, I can't believe this is true, but in the nearly 20 years that I've been attending these meetings, since my then advisor, Penny Edgell, invited me when I was a second-year PhD student, the collegiality I've experienced, the support for my work, the opportunities to network with, to know and to be known from those across the social scientific disciplines is really unparalleled. In fact, I can remember right where I was sitting when I had a conversation with Corwin Smith about what it was like to teach at a small liberal arts school and still publish as much as he does. I can look at many, many of you and think of where I was sitting when I had important career-changing conversations. I've received research ideas that are new, ideas about applying to grants, encouragement to apply to particular jobs. All of these trace to the experiences that I've had through the Society for the Scientific Study of Religion. So I'm personally deeply grateful for this organization and for the impact it's had on my scholarly life. Our origin story and our structure have given us many good things and served many of our members well. And yet, I think we sense that there's a need to continue to re-envision and to write new pieces of our story. We need to continue to diversify the Society for the Scientific Study of Religion in terms of fields and topics studied, in terms of continued push towards true interdisciplinarity, in terms of people we invite to the table to do the studying, and if I may take this metaphor further, to create new tables altogether, to try to translate our work to ever new groups of constituents. Here's why. The demographics of American and global religion is changing. I'm repeating what many of you are already saying. According to one of our former SSSR presidents, Robert Wuthnow, there's a growing sense that American and global religion is in the midst of a profound transformation, one that calls not only for the usual kinds of good scholarship, but also for re-examining the premises on which that scholarship is based. Following changes in immigration and naturalization laws that occurred in 1965, as we know, the U.S., just one case, experienced a wave of new migration that rivaled the one that started at the turn of the 20th century in scope and magnitude. The earlier period, of course, was dominated by immigrants from largely Christian countries, and the recent period has included vast numbers of immigrants from countries with predominantly Muslim, Hindu, or Buddhist populations. In addition, immigration has literally changed the face of American Christianity. Immigrant and second-generation Koreans have changed the face of Protestant seminaries. Mexican immigrants and others from the Latin Americas have changed the face of the Catholic and the Protestant Church. The growth of non-Christians has been noticeable since immigration laws changed. The proportion of Americans claiming a faith that's not Christianity appears to have grown about 3- to 4-fold since 1970. Thus, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and others represent a small but really radically growing and significant in terms of their cultural impact growth in the religious landscape. I want to say, too, that many new immigrants, though, are not religious, and that the proportion of non-religious in the U.S. in general is also growing. Again, a segment of the population that some of our SSSR members are doing cutting-edge work to understand and address. Religion is changing globally, and we need to attend to that. Fen Gong-yang, our association's president in 2015, argued in his presidential address that by 2030, China is likely to become the largest Christian country in the world. Others have argued that there is the need for scholars to essentially provincialize the United States, to recognize and appropriate resources produced by researchers working in non-U.S. contexts to grapple with the theoretical challenges we face. We need to study the ways religious lives and religious institutions are increasingly transnational, as Dee Dee does in her studies of Chinese Buddhist communities in Shanghai and Houston, and Simranjit Khalsa does in her examination of the Sikh community, a majority world tradition that's the numeric minority in every nation in which it's present. Point 2, part 2, okay, just if you're taking notes. Studying religious diversity then can challenge us, right? It can really prompt us to rethink standard conceptions of the social scientific study of religion. We need to continue to examine religious organizations in all their varied forms, and many of us do this extraordinarily well. But then we need to walk through the religious organizations out their doors and into whole new conceptions of what religion is, how people form religious communities inside and outside of institutions that we formerly thought of as, quote, secular. Certainly, work like Esmeralda Sanchez Salazar's research does this when she explores Latino Protestant and Catholic involvement with local schools. My work with Denise Daniels does this in its exploration of religion in the workplace. According to one of our scholars, one of the special contributions of ethnographic work is to challenge the usefulness of standard concepts in the study of religion that have grown largely from thinking focused on Christianity entirely. Concepts such as congregation, sect, even fundamentalism and faith have been advanced and yet clearly pertain more to one religious tradition than another. Point 2, part 3. Diversifying the study of religion can also contribute to other fields in the social sciences, and I love the kind of conversations that I've had even in this particular meeting about how we're taking our work into the American Psychological Association, into the American Political Science Association, other associations, so that we can really challenge and change how scholars think about immigration and politics. Cecilia Menjivar reflects the resurgence in immigration scholars' interest in religion is opening the door to a rich conversation for all of us, as the work on migration and religion pushes conventional domestic boundaries to engage questions and issues relevant beyond the U.S. context. Diversifying the study of religion in different social spheres can also shed light on our common life together and some of that kind of public outreach that was part of our origin story in the beginning. Given increased religious diversity in the United States and the complex social dynamics connected to the diversity, We need to understand more about all the different social spheres that allow different religious groups to come into contact with each other. Things like power relations, issues of equality, discrimination that all bear out in the workplace, in sports, and in other kinds of institutions. One particular area of polarization that's really worth mentioning, I think, is work on religiously motivated hate crimes, that some of us are just starting to do. I'm just beginning a study with Christopher Scheidel, made possible through the National Science Foundation, where we're asking how religion and religious identities might both motivate religiously based othering, as well as the potential causes and consequences of religious discrimination and victimization. This will allow us the opportunity, for example, to think strategically and more critically about how race and religion might overlap in shaping and understanding experiences of discrimination, work that Sharon Carr Mehta is already doing. Understanding intergroup relations across religious traditions is important. While a significant body of research has examined Americans' tolerance of groups generally perceived to be unpopular, surprisingly little research has examined attitudes towards non-Christians. Given the notable growth of non-Christian Americans in recent decades, more research in this area is critical. Last, and perhaps most important, it's vitally important to have a diversity of scholars studying diverse topics in the social scientific study of religion. I'm reminded of this in my own research on science and religion, trying to understand how scientists understand religion and how different religious groups understand science. And I remember giving an academic talk once that was attended by a scholar of religion, a black woman who did not study science in particular, but studied other issues related to religion. And after I got done with my talk, she was kind enough not to confront me publicly, but pulled me aside and said, "Elaine, I think you talked about science a little too positively in your talk." And she said, "Science has not been safe for everyone." And she started talking about her own racialized experiences being in the social sciences and the reasons that Black Americans in particularly might be mistrustful of science. I'd known about Tuskegee, but I hadn't really thought deeply until that moment about how Tuskegee syphilis trials might be related to my particular studies of science and religion. And that was a really groundbreaking research conversation, which was born out of my colleague's own social location, which then had an impact on my intellectual trajectory. Diverse scholars studying religion in its diversity is important. One of our former presidents said, "No social scientist, I contend, is able to simply park his or her values at the door, as the image of a value-free social science so conveniently suggests. Our intention should not be to suggest what normative considerations be mixed willy-nilly into what passes as social science, but that we be more deliberate and take more care to examine the normative assumptions that are already implicit in social science." Not only does having a diverse group of scholars studying religion add to the richness of our collective enterprise, it can also address methodological weaknesses and biases. White Protestant Christianity is incredibly important to study, especially in this day and age. But if it's overrepresented to the exclusion of other kinds of topics, it can lead to particular kinds of implicit biases, maybe even methodological, in some of the studies and work that we do. As leaders, our deep commitment to evaluating our association, trying to achieve diversity for the next 70 years, is instantiated in some pieces of our new strategic plan for the association. I hope in 50, or maybe even if I may be so bold, maybe even in 10 years, that some of the following might be added to whoever is talking about our origin story. The Strategic Planning Committee, led by 2018 SSSR President Corey Edwards, and she wanted to make sure, I asked her if it was okay to mention her name so much in the talk because she's not here. She wanted to make sure that I mentioned that Roman Williams and his team at Calvin College were extraordinarily important and a piece of this, especially in the survey. This included, the Strategic Planning Committee included past president, president-elect, our executive officer, council members, students, those who represent other constituent groups within our association. We convened in 2018 to analyze research and conduct discussions about strengthening the Society for the Scientific Study of Religion. We started with a survey spearheaded by the Center for Social Research at Calvin College. It was completed by 600 people with a response rate of 29%. The respondents, we think, reflect the disciplinary, racial, and regional diversity of the association. Then, the members of the Strategic Planning Committee met for a 2.5-day retreat in the hill country of Ohio. I did not even know there was hill country in Ohio, and until I went on this, there is hill country in Ohio. I really commend it to you if you're looking for some place to go. Where was it called? Hocking Hills. Hocking Hills. Okay, that just came to me. The first day of the retreat began reflexively. The committee members discussed in both small groups and large groups their personal values. We shared some of our own story, our reasons for engaging in the social scientific study of religion. We talked about our dreams for the SSSR. It's also important to stress that especially through the survey, which included both quantitative parts and then qualitative pieces where people could write in responses, that we tried as best we could to amplify the voices of those who weren't present in the room. Finally, based on these conversations, our survey, and our data analysis, several broad themes were isolated. The entire strategic planning report is about 12 single-spaced pages. That would be a very large point indeed for me to now read to you, so I'm not going to do that. Please do not be afraid. We're probably about 2/3 through the talk now, so just hold on, food is coming. So I'm not going to talk about all that, but I did want to talk through some of the core values that we distilled and that relate to this theme of diversity. I'm going to go through them briefly one by one. Our first value is excellent scholarship, which seems right for an academic organization like ours. It requires the development of relevant, evidence-based knowledge that advances the social scientific study of religion. Excellent scholarship is required for us to be a prestigious pursuit, for our association to be a prestigious pursuit, and for us to play a crucial role in excellent scholarship by mentoring, supporting, and connecting social scientists of religion throughout the life course of their scholarly careers. In addition, we want to see our journal, the Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion, to continue to be a competitive advantage of the SSSR in promoting a high standard of creative, consequential, and cross-disciplinary research. The second value is inclusive community, which comprises an intentional space where people are nurtured, respected, and connected. The Society for the Scientific Study of Religion has a kind of advantage, perhaps, over other organizations in that it already spans many groups in the study of religion. We hail from different branches of social science, different regions of the globe, as well as different racial and ethnic groups and different genders, and I could go on in terms of our diversity. Thus, by naming inclusive community as a core value, we want to really amplify and expand and improve what we're already doing and starting. In particular, we want to emphasize the diversity of our existing membership. We want to ensure that all feel the same sense of belonging that many already do, and which came out in our survey. We want to expand and strengthen diversity and bring more people into this kind of community atmosphere of the SSSR meetings. In short, everyone should have the kind of opportunities through the SSSR that I have had. Our commitment to inclusive community is informed by the awareness that some members, namely non-sociologists, those residing outside of North America, and racial and ethnic minorities express lower levels of satisfaction with the SSSR, which has a significant impact on our future leadership and our organizational development. For example, in our 2018 survey, those who identified as a person of color were far more likely to be interested in serving on SSSR leadership than their counterparts who did not identify as such. At the same time, Respondents of color were more likely to report that there are barriers that make it difficult for people to participate in a leadership role. 49% of people of color felt there were barriers that made it just hard to know how to participate in a leadership role, compared to about 30% those who were not. In addition, it was telling to us when given the option to elaborate on barriers to leadership, the respondents cited things like lack of institutional support and competing obligations, which I think many of us cite, but they also articulated the sense that the SSSR is not for them, that it's focused primarily on the North American context, that perhaps SSSR leaders are, as one respondent said, maybe implicitly expected to be white, Christian, men, or sociologists. Our qualitative comments included things like, SSSR is very North American. I feel a person who's not active in that context would have a difficulty finding their place. SSSR is dominated by religious individuals. If you're not personally religious, then that's a barrier to leadership. I have no idea how to apply for a leadership position. It seems like leaders just select their friends, says another. To me, it seems like an old boys club with subgroups that seem impenetrable to me. I don't want to overstress these comments, but I do not want to sweep them under the rug. We need to listen carefully to these voices. As part of this, we've started a new Pathways to Leadership program on our website. Also, I think it's worth stating out loud that when asked to rate their satisfaction with a variety of kinds of diversity at their SSSR annual meeting, respondents were least satisfied with ethnic or racial diversity, with 30% or more of our respondents indicating that they were somewhat or very dissatisfied. And about 50% of respondents who identified as a person of color reported being dissatisfied with the racial diversity at the SSSR meetings. I think this survey data powerfully illustrates that inclusive community needs to be given a very special place in the strategic plan of the SSSR. That SSSR doesn't feel as welcome for everyone. Finally, the value of public engagement involves proactively translating social scientific research on religion for multiple publics. The social scientific study of religion was foundational to the development of many of the social sciences. Today, however, it's perhaps less central than it should be, given the importance of religion in all its varied forms to societies around the globe. This value connotes a kind of proactive approach to engaging others with the importance of our work, to getting out in front of publicizing our work and helping others publicize their work. The publics we work with include our respective disciplines, news media, as well as other interested groups and organizations. This value also reflects the desire that many of us have in the organization to improve the lives of others. And now I want to talk briefly about some of our next immediate steps for the strategic plan, our 5 goals for 5 years. Our first goal is to have no difference in satisfaction with SSSR among members by race and ethnicity, gender, discipline, national origin, sexuality, or career phase. Our second goal is to create a structure of mentoring and training to better equip SSSR members for excellent scholarship. Under Laura Olson's leadership, we already have a mentoring committee. We have cohorts of mentors and mentees that will already be started at this annual meeting. We also are working to create professional development sessions, which you've seen some of at this meeting as well. We want all of our panels to be diverse, including members who are not sociologists, not from the US or Canada, who are people of color, and we want over time to try to get more and more of these diverse panels in place. Third, we want to triple the number of underrepresented minority scholars, non-US and Canada scholars, and non-sociologists who are members of the SSSR. Fourthly, we want to develop public engagement structures that promote JSSR articles and SSSR members and activities. And we want you to keep coming to these annual meetings. We want to retain 70% of new attendees to the annual meeting as new members by offering a first-time attendee discount. Third and final, and other things. Third and finally, my commitment, this is my big third point, just if you're counting, my commitment to seeing these goals realized in the SSSR is really a personal one for me. Over the course of my career so far, I've tried to seek out opportunities to diversify the social scientific study of religion through my own research, including work on how religious individuals interact with science, with race, concepts, and with gender. But as I conclude my address, I want to reflect more on another piece of my work, my other scholarly work, that's more about outreach. Over the past 9 years, through our work at the Religion and Public Life program, we've tried to really intentionally diversify the studies and the types of people that we study, and we try to diversify our translation efforts in ways that promote excellent scholarship, inclusive community, and public engagement. We lead studies, we do lots of surveys, we publish books, we publish articles. Our team has published about over 100 articles over the last 9 years. But through our research, we also want to address the role of religion in the most pressing social problems of our day, as well as to show the significance of religion for everyday lived experience. Part of what drives our research is training and mentoring, and we take this pedagogical imperative seriously, just as this association is taking its pedagogical imperative seriously. Over the past 9 years, we trained 80 undergraduates how to do research on religion and public life. We draw students from different disciplines. We've also involved more than 14 PhD students from departments as diverse as sociology, economics, philosophy, and religion. Students that are also diverse, and I hope continue to become more so in the years to come, in terms of their own racial locations, gender, ethnicity, national origin, and religious orientation. We also want to share academic work and translate work, and I love this part of it the most because I'm not the one who's really fully as involved as some others on our team are involved. We want to get on the ground and share our work to disparate groups, which is a critical skill in today's world. Our hope is that we'll continue to do cutting-edge research, but that this research can really be intentionally translated in the best way possible to help different groups understand one another, to build common ground, which might in turn allow them to work effectively towards different kinds of common goods, which serve different groups well. Part of what we do is we host public events, and it's funny, I've gotten a lot of pushback from some of my local university colleagues because we host a lot of public events in my home and in other places around the university, which I was really motivated by a social psychologist research that I read, which showed very powerfully to me that actually people don't change their minds usually by just getting a lot more new information. And that was actually at first extremely disheartening because my whole raison d'etre as an academic, right, is just to lob lots of information at you. Like that's what we do, is we just keep publishing and writing and getting information out there. But this social psychologist found that new information is helpful, but after you build trusting relationships. So you need to build the bridge before you try to pass new ideas over that bridge. And so that's really changed how we do some of our work at Rice through the Religion and Public Life program, where we spend a lot of time and effort getting to know religious leaders, nonprofit leaders, civic leaders, others in our community through monthly gatherings where we bring them all together under one roof to share a meal, and then we give them research findings. Over the past 2 years, some of our work has explored the role of faith in natural disaster resilience, how minority religious communities are responding to hate crimes, how religious communities engage with science, and lots of other kinds of efforts. I've been impressed by the wide range of perspectives on the study of religion that are offered by attendees, says one person who attended. He says, I value how these gatherings bring people together under the same roof who might not engage in constructive conversations in any other setting, says a university staff member. Based on my personal experiences with my own public outreach work, I'm convinced that the kind of commitment that the SSSR is embarking on now, that of a commitment to excellent scholarship, to truly inclusive community, and public engagement, will reap substantial benefits for the SSSR as it moves into its next 70 years, into its next phase of growth and development. As a society, we have an opportunity right now to take the best of our origin story spirit, to learn from the continued push for diversity and inclusion within the history of the SSSR and to bring it forward. Continue to bring the social scientific study of religion to bear on the most pressing social issues of our day by supporting a diversity of topics, by supporting a diversity of scholars and modes of engagement. We can ensure that these issues are addressed in ways that capture religion's full social complexity and attend to a wide range of lived experiences. Thank you.